there he is. Good morning. How are you?
Doing fabulous.
We are so glad to have you on this morning. So let us go ahead and get started. And you do know, Governor, that it is being recorded. So, and I'm trying to get it to where I can. Anyway, let's get started. So I just want to start out with first to say, to remind everybody our purpose of why we are here and how this got developed. And that was so that 5 of us got together and we decided that we wanted to take all that emotion from last year's election and that anger and the emotion and put it into something constructive and inform and educate and to take action. And that's where we came together. And one of the great things is that we are taking action. We've been doing this since the beginning of session. And this week, we asked people to to make calls or to email on HB 2546 to get it out of the committee. And what they do, they got it out of, it worked. It got out of committee. Everything that we asked to be done was done. And I wish that we could do this for all the different committees. And I know I get requests to talk about education or talk about health, but you know what? We have to stay focused on election reform. And that's what we're doing today. We're going to continue that. And we are so excited to have our governor with us today. And who best to be able to say is working for election reform. Governor, you have been fighting for this for a long time, but just in the last couple of months, I just want to highlight a couple things. One, you made it an emergency item to allow the legislators to work on it right away. Number 2, now this is really dear to me, is that you didn't throw out that first pitch at that baseball game. And I appreciate that, and a lot of us do. That was a huge statement. And something else is that you're on this call today to share your vision and the direction we're going and how we're going to continue as Texans. You've been fighting for this for a long time, Governor. As Attorney General, that was one of the items was election fraud that you focused on, besides defending our religious freedoms and protecting children. You did incredible work there. But as our leader as governor, you have truly dedicated yourself to Texas, to Texans, and for raising families. Our values here, keep bringing in businesses, having opportunities here in Texas. And that's because of your leadership, Governor. And we really, truly appreciate that. So I'm going to turn this over to you because I do know we're limited on time, but we are so blessed to have you, and thank you for being on. And then when we're ready, we'll have maybe a couple questions that you might be able to answer. So thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. The way the screen was working, I couldn't determine exactly for sure who that was talking. It sounded like Tony Ann.
You were right.
Oh, there you go. Yes. So Tony Ann, thank you very much for setting the table so well. The way that you said it, it will limit my remarks to only about 3 or 4 hours to discuss all those topics you talked about, which is easily how long I could go on. If you don't know, I don't know what was discussed before I came on. I do have a hard out at 7:30. A reason why is if you were to turn on your TV and watch on Fox News, I'm going to be on Fox News at 7:45 this morning. I have to leave the governor's mansion and go down the street and go to the studio to get on the Fox News to talk about the challenges that we continue to face on the border and how much worse that is going to get and what we are urging the Biden administration to do. In the meantime, let me try to address some of the issues brought up by Tony Ann and expand upon it a little bit about exactly what is going on. One thing you talked about is how I made election integrity an emergency item. And you hear all this rhetoric, whether it be from some of the businesses. You mentioned Major League Baseball. There are other businesses in the state of Texas that have made arguments about this, as well as, of course, the Democrats who passed along their own rhetoric about it. And then there's some who say that, well, what Texas is doing or what Georgia did or whatever the case may be is something in response to the presidential election in 2020. And I want to make sure that I arm you with information, you being everybody who is on this Zoom right now, so that you will be able to join with us in articulating to the public, to the media, to anybody, exactly what is going on, and more importantly, why it is going on. And so what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is to arm you with the arguments and maybe, if you would, some talking points about exactly what is going on. First is this, and that is election integrity is an emergency item this session. And Tony Ann, you mentioned that one reason is I did that is to help legislators get going quickly, but also if the people in the Capitol know, if the governor labels something an emergency item, that means it must be passed. And then we're going to stay in session until we get this emergency item passed. And so it means it's a must-do item this session. And this is nothing new for the state of Texas. Election fraud or election integrity is something that we've been dealing with pretty much during the entirety of my public service in the state of Texas. Candidly, that's incorrect. It's something that traces all the way back to the days of LBJ, when LBJ won the Senate seat in the United States through the process of election fraud. And we've been battling it ever since then, but very prolifically, going back to my time as Attorney General. During my time as Attorney General, I began to aggressively prosecute voter fraud across the state of Texas. And then after I left and became governor, General Paxton has picked up that baton, and he too has been prosecuting voter fraud across the state of Texas. Importantly, to give an example of the magnitude of voter fraud, but also the fact that others recognize that we must address voter fraud in Texas, it's not just been me or Attorney General Kim Paxton. It also, believe this or not, what also has been President Barack Obama and Vice President Biden. During the Obama-Biden administration, they knew the severity of voter fraud in the state of Texas, especially down in the Rio Grande Valley. And they organized a team of FBI agents and the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Texas and sent them on a mission to the Rio Grande Valley to crack down on what was rampant voter fraud at that time, especially as it concerned mail-in ballots. And they were able to successfully prosecute politiqueros in the Rio Grande Valley for using cocaine to buy votes, and that led to, obviously, voter fraud in the Rio Grande Valley. So some of those who tell you, well, the voter fraud is not real, or whatever the case may be, or it's only a Republican talking point, this proves the Democrats themselves want to crack down on voter fraud. Separate from that, and on top of all that, the state of Texas was involved in passing a voter ID law that was challenged in court. When it was challenged in court, it went before a Barack Obama appointed federal district judge. And that federal district judge wrote an opinion in the voter ID case that eventually was resolved, and we now have voter ID in the state of Texas. However, in that case, there were some sentences that the Barack Obama appointed federal district judge wrote that talks about how prolific voter fraud is in the state of Texas. I want to read you two, maybe three sentences from that opinion so that you'll notice these aren't Republican talking points. These aren't political points. These are judicial points talking about how prolific voter fraud is in Texas. So this is in a case called Vesey versus Perry. Perry was the governor at the time that this took place. And here's what this federal judge wrote. There appears to be agreement that voter fraud actually takes place in abundance in connection with absentee balloting. Absentee balloting, of course, is the mail-in ballot process. Because this is so prolific and because it runs so counter to the media and to the liberal talking points, I want to emphasize this sentence again with the key word in abundance. There appears to be agreement that voter fraud actually takes place in abundance in connection with absentee balloting. That sentence was followed by this sentence. Some campaign assistants befriend the elderly and raid their mailboxes when mail-in ballots arrive from the county. So it's more than just a generalized statement that voter fraud for absentee ballots occurs in abundance. The judge goes on to articulate one of the many ways in which mail-in ballot or mail-in ballot fraud is perpetuated in the state of Texas. And so with that background, and then with what happened during the election process this past year, which was the year when we had an election during the pandemic, and what happened in Harris County in particular, where Harris County unilaterally tried to rewrite the election laws in the state of Texas and committed multiple violations. It is necessary for the state of Texas to make sure that the legacy of voter fraud in the state of Texas is addressed. And then for another, the state of Texas must step up and correct the erroneous decision-making that was made by Harris County elected officials. Let me run through a couple of these, and then to the extent we have any time left, I'm going to be more than happy to take a few questions. One thing that we did, or that has been proposed in the bills in the House and Senate, is contrary to what some of these businesses are talking about, and definitely what the Democrats are talking about. And that is, one thing proposed by Republicans in the state legislature actually expands voting, not contracts it. Let me give you several ways in which voting is expanding. One is we are in our legislation expanding or increasing the number of hours that can be used for voting purposes. The number of hours for early voting, as well as the number of hours for the election day voting. So as opposed to restricting or reducing hours of voting, we are increasing hours of voting. And this is part of our overall goal, and that is to make voting easier, but harder to cheat. So the number one is number of hours is longer. The two is we are retaining the number of days for early voting. Let me tell you why that's important. Some people say that, well, Texas is engaging in voter suppression. To the contrary of that, we have 12 days of early voting in the state of Texas. That is far more days of early voting than what they have in New York State, in New Jersey, and in Delaware, the state that Joe Biden is from. They have 0 days of early voting. No one is talking about suppression of voting in Delaware or New York or New Jersey, even though they have fewer days of early voting than what we have in the state of Texas. And it's just completely bunk to say that, well, the state of Texas is suppressing elections or voting, when we're making it far easier to vote than these Democrat states of New Jersey, New York, and Delaware. Now, another thing that we did is we have a provision in these bills that says that anybody in a early voting line at the time that the polls close get to remain in that line until they have the opportunity to vote. Now, some of you may be wondering what I'm talking about, because you seem to remember that, well, if that's always been the case when you've been in line, even at the time the polls close, you have the chance to vote. That process has applied only to election day voting. On election day, if you know that the polls close at 7 p.m., for example, you know that if you make it to the polling location by 7 p.m., even if there's a line of 100 people or 1,000 people, you're going to be able to get in line and still have the chance to vote, even if it means that you do not actually make it to the poll until 10 p.m. We wanted to make sure that we expanded that capability, not just to election day, but to all of these 12 early voting days, such that if you make it to the early voting polls by the closing deadline for the election on early voting, you still are going to have a chance to vote, even if it means you don't get to the poll until 9, 10, or 11 o'clock, whenever the last person is able to make it to the polls. And then another thing that we did, we ensured that there would be an equal number of machines and locations in countywide voting places. Let me tell you why we put this in, and it shows how the media twists and turns everything that happens. The reason why we needed to put this in was because of errors that were made by the voting administrator in Harris County, who was a Democrat. A Democrat made errors in Harris County about the way they were providing voting machines and voting locations, but it was Republicans who were criticized for it. but those who are in Harris County may remember exactly what I'm about to tell you. And that is during the primary election process, there was an election location near the historically Black University of Texas Southern. And the Democrat election administrator provided them only a handful of machines in what turned out to be a very high voter turnout area. And it turned out that because at that time, once the polls closed, people were not going to be able to vote. And there were many people who showed up to vote early in that Democrat precinct that were incapable of doing so because there were only a couple of machines in what turned out to be high voter turnout area. Republicans were criticized for that, even though it was a Democrat in charge of making that decision. And then on the flip side, when they got to the general election in November and also early voting in October for that general election, they overcompensated. The Democrat administrator overcompensated and made sure that the Democrat precincts were going to have plenty of voting machines and plenty of voter locations. And they shorted Republicans in a proportionate access to voting machines as well as voting locations. And so because of these ham-handed errors made by Democrats, we needed to make sure that there would be equality in access to voting machines and voting locations based upon the number of people located in particular voting regions. So those are some of the main things that we've done to expand the opportunity for people to be able to vote. There are several restrictions that we are imposing for voting, and there's only two reasons behind those restrictions. One concerns mail-in ballots, and the other concerns ways in which Harris County exceeded the law and implemented voting policies that were not only contrary to law, but voting policies that promoted the potential for voter fraud to take place. One is counties or other jurisdictions cannot send unsolicited mail-in ballot applications to all voters. And there's a reason for that. As you know, for a mail-in ballot, there are only certain categories of people who qualify for that. Well, what Harris County actually did, they actually sent out millions of mail-in ballots to every single voter in Harris County, leading to the potential that every single voter in Harris County could have been returning mail-in ballots. That was in clear violation of the law. We went to court and we did get a court decision forcing Harris County to retract those mail-in ballots that were sent out erroneously. Well, we are now just codifying the federal court decision upholding Texas law, saying that no, counties cannot send out mail-in ballots to every single person because it would lead to the possibility that there would be many mail-in ballots returned that were sent in by people who were ineligible to cast a mail-in ballot. So this is a way to prevent voter fraud or erroneous voting from taking place, but that simply basically reiterates what Texas law is and codifies that federal court decision. Second is one thing that Harris County did because of the COVID situation. They wanted to provide voting in a setting that would reduce the potential spread of COVID. And so they had these drive-through voting facilities. Well, drive-through voting has never been done in the state of Texas before now. And so all we are doing is we are confirming what everyone has known in the past, and that is drive-in voting is not allowed. And so some people consider that to be a restriction because it ratchets back on what Harris County did during the time of COVID. But we're not going to be dealing with COVID situations or pandemic situations in elections in the future, and we don't need these more expansive policies. Something else along those lines that Harris County did is they had voting 24 hours a day for several days. And that has never been done in the past. And we are not allowing voting to take place 24 hours a day. We are allowing a 12-hour period during the day, which is plenty of hours that's needed, 12 hours a day, every single day for early voting as well as on election day. But the reason why 24-hour, especially what was used in Harris County, was for early voting. The reason why we're not allowing that to take place is because we want to make sure that we have poll watchers available to monitor anything that may be taking place And, candidly, Republicans may be less likely to be awake and alert and showing up to all these different polling sites at 2, 3, or 4 a.m. in the morning. And we want to make sure that we have people there available to monitor and make sure there is no illegal voting taking place or no other impropriety taking place. So this just gives you a general feel of some of the most prominent provisions that are contained in the legislation that is moving forward. And I can just assure you this as I pause I got 2 minutes for questions. So let me take one or two of your best questions, because as you're going to find out, in just 17 minutes from now, I'm going to be live on TV at a location different from one I'm in right now. So Tony Ann or whoever, let me try to take a question, then I'm going to have to take off.
Go ahead.
Welcome to the election integrity hot seat of Texas, Governor. The first question, I hope it doesn't take as long, it's a two-part question. During the November 2020 election cycle, we saw private funds from the Zuckerberg family attempt to change election practices and law. Now corporate executives and the media are attempting to do the same through public bullying. Soon, the Texas legislature will pass laws which restrict the use of public funds for conducting elections, which contain other significant measures to ensure integrity in Texas elections. First of all, what can or will you do as governor to counteract the corporate bullying and media attacks on Texas election laws? And secondly, can you and other governors join together to speak out against these corporate media tactics?
Sure. So there's two parts to that, and I'm going to be able to answer this. Then I'm going to have to make a sudden departure to go over to Fox News. But first, we view it highly inappropriate for money like the Zuckerbergs, or you could say George Soros or anybody else, to weigh in to either modify election laws or to do other practices that would be problematic as it concerns the integrity of elections. And so we want to make sure that we work on legislation that would prevent the use of that money to alter the election process. Second, we are pushing back very aggressively against any of these business entities that are falsely and erroneously and in quite an uninformed way trying to criticize what the state of Texas is doing. You mentioned in your introduction what I did with regard to Major League Baseball. And I did that because, for one, what Major League Baseball did in Georgia was based upon false information. They bought into what Stacey Abrams was saying, which was completely false. And then for another, we knew what was going to be coming in the state of Texas, both with Major League Baseball as well as other businesses. And we wanted to use that as an opportunity to begin the process of pushing back. Since that time, actually, I was on Fox News the day after that. And I articulated two businesses in the state of Texas. There were several that came out and began to criticize Texas for our attempt to ensure that we prevent cheating in elections in Texas, but also promote more access to ballots. It was AT&T, it was Dell, it was American Airlines and others. And we pushed back very aggressively, making very clear that these CEOs, these businesses that are criticizing the state of Texas are completely uninformed about what they're talking about. For one, they're uninformed because they were not recognizing the fact that Texas actually was making voting even easier, and they were uninformed about the legacy of voter fraud in the state of Texas, and that it was necessary, if nothing else, based upon the Obama judge federal court decision that said there is an abundance of election fraud taking place in the mail-in ballot process. And surely none of these CEOs are going to be backing or supporting that abundance of election fraud in the state of Texas. And so we will continue to push back against those officials. And our hope is that you will join us in that process. You will use your voices to share with others the points that I covered today to make sure that we have an even more robust group of people who are sharing these talking points, that what Texas is doing, we are making voting easier than before, but also we are ensuring that we will have integrity in the election process to do everything possible to prevent cheating at the ballot box in Texas. With that said, I got to go over and get on an interview with Fox News, but thank you all very, very much for the role that you're playing. We need you to be partners with us and making sure, for one, we get this bill across the finish line to my desk and sign, which is going to happen. But two, you help join us in the public discourse to make sure that the public knows that what we are doing is promoting elections while at the same time ensuring integrity in the election process. Thank you all very, very much for everything you do.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you so much. You were awesome. Good luck on Fox. You'll be
Thank
good.
you.
Thanks. Okay, where did let's see, where'd he go? Right here. Okay, I think that was you. Okay, wow, that was awesome. He is incredible, and I am very pleased, just thankful that he joined us. Okay, now what we're going to do is we have something new. The last week I was talking with a couple people and realized that we don't have, let's see, did I lose you guys there? That we don't have the, sorry guys, that we don't have a weekly report from the Senate. So it was just incredible. I end up, Senator Donna Campbell connected me with Senator Brian Hughes, and he says, yes, I would love to come on, and I would love to be able to give that report. So today, he's debuting today, and hopefully we'll be able to continue throughout the rest of the session and join our calls. And if he doesn't, someone else will. But Senator Hughes, he's on 6 committees. I mean, that's just incredible, just a number of committees. But he chairs the State of Affairs Committee, which is the one that deals with elections. And we are, he's an attorney. He has a lot of experience. He was a state rep for 14 years before getting elected to the Senate in 2016. He's doing an incredible job. What he wants is people to have the opportunity for the American dream. And he's doing that through the law, the policy. And so we welcome him. And I'm hoping you're unmuted there. Are you? If you're not, then just a moment. Are you unmuted?
I'm in.
Oh,
I'm in.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
He's been going back and forth, and I said, well, Senator Hughes, we welcome you, and please give us an update before we hear from Chairwoman Click and Representative JC. So please, thank you for being with us, and let's hear what you have to say in the Senate.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and my goodness, the governor laid things out really well, and I know there are ladies and gentlemen on the call, but I'm going to talk about Republican women in particular. So thank y'all so.
What happened?
Thank you. Back. For some reason, it muted me again. I was just saying thank you so much for what y'all do. Where would Texas be if we didn't have our Republican women? That's a rhetorical question I don't want to have to think about. So we just thank the Lord for you. Briefly, in the Senate, thank you for mentioning the State Affairs Committee. That's where, as you say, election integrity and religious freedom and pro-life matters and gun rights and so many things that are important to us go. And it's a real blessing for me to get to chair that committee. The Lieutenant Governor made me chairman of it. I was a member before. I was vice chair. Now I'm the chairman. And so it's a big responsibility, but also a real joy to get to work on these things. So Senate Bill 7 is the omnibus Senate election integrity bill, and I'm proud to be the author of Senate Bill 7. Governor Abbott's going to be on Fox News. We're so thankful for him. I've been on CNN a couple of times the last 2 weeks. Over at CNN, they don't like Senate Bill 7 too much. They don't like it because they're on the left, and they don't want us to clean up the system. But let me mention a couple of things that the governor talked about. The question you asked, one of the questions for the governor at the end, had to do with those grants, about how Mark Zuckerberg gave millions of dollars for the election process in Texas. Senate Bill 7, which the Senate passed and is on its way to the House, Senate Bill 7 makes those grants illegal. The private parties cannot give those big grants for the elections unless they're approved by the Secretary of State, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker. So the point of that is elections are not for sale in Texas. We're not going to let Zuckerberg or Soros or anyone, any group, come in and use money to influence the election process. Elections are paid for by the state. They're a state function. So that's important. as far as those polling locations, Governor Abbott explained it very well. Of all the things we put in Senate Bill 7, we've gotten much criticism about polling locations. And Senate Bill 7 says that if you're an urban county, 1 million people or more, then you have to distribute those polling places and those voting machines evenly across the county based on voter population. Here's what we learned. In Harris County, I know there are many Houston folks on the call. In Harris County, Precinct 1 is the largest, has the highest number of Democrats. Precinct 4 has the highest number of Republicans. So the Republican precinct is bigger in surface area and has more voters than the Democratic precinct. Yet, in early voting, the Democratic precinct had 42 polling places. The Republican precinct had 25. And what about early voting, which they made up? They just created in Harris County. They had drive-through voting, which they just made up, not in the election code. For drive-through voting, they put 5 of those locations in that Democratic precinct. In the larger and more voters Republican precinct, they had 2. Just a couple of examples of why we had to put in the law in those large urban counties when you can't use your partisan power to stack the deck against the opposition. It's exactly what the Democrats did to us in Harris County. But neither party should do that. Those polling places and voting machines should be distributed evenly based on where the voters are. There's been some reports in the media that we've limited the number of polling places, limited the number of voting machines. I don't want to use extreme language, but I'm just going to tell you that is a lie. That's a lie. We did not limit the number. They can have as many as they want, but they've got to distribute them fairly to where the voters are. Polling places are for voters. We also know that mail ballot fraud, as the governor said, has been our largest area of cheating in Texas, going, well, probably all the way back to before any of us were around. And so there's some common sense reforms to the election, the mail ballot election process. When someone claims a disability for a mail ballot, the form now will define what a disability is and warn that voter, if you falsely make this claim, you are subject to a state jail felony. Now, that's already the law. It's already a state jail felony, but now we're going to warn folks. We're going to let them know. Because here's what we found. Most voter fraud, and we've heard testimony from prosecutors, from election workers, from the Attorney General's office, from law enforcement. Most of the voter fraud is not done by the voters themselves so much as it's done by these vote harvesters who take advantage of the voters, who manipulate them, who sometimes steal their ballots or coerce them into filling out their ballots in a certain way. Senate Bill 7 deals with that, and it makes ballot harvesting a crime, and also allows people to bring suit against ballot harvesters, so they can have criminal charges as well as civil charges brought against them. So the candidate who gets cheated can bring a claim against them. Any individual can. And so it's going to make it much easier to shut down these ballot harvesters who are just cheating. And so poll watchers, what about poll watchers? Those poll watchers are the eyes and ears of the public. It's important that they be there, that they have access, they'd be allowed in, and be able and be close enough to see and hear how the election is being conducted. And that's also in Senate Bill 7. Strong common sense provisions in there as well. A number of things in Senate Bill 7 that we're very excited about. We also have some standalone election bills, which we have passed the Senate. They've all come through the State Affairs Committee. They're through the Senate floor and on their way over to the House. I know we're going to get a report from the House. The House is working hard on election integrity as well. But from the Senate side, this is kind of what's happening. When Senate Bill 7, this major election reform omnibus bill came up, we had a 7-hour debate. We're not sure if that's a record for the Texas Senate. As you know, politicians can talk for a pretty long time. And so that was my bill. And so we had a lot of questions. I believe every Democratic senator engaged in that debate. They offered a lot of amendments and to try to weaken the bill. We were accused of all kinds of things during that debate and also by the media since that time. But Governor Abbott laid it out very clearly. Senate Bill 7 is common sense reforms that apply to everyone across the board. They apply to Republicans, to Democrats, So if someone is screaming really loud about what's in Senate Bill 7, well, I don't know what that means, but it means they oppose common sense reforms that apply to every voter across the board, make the system better. As Governor Abbott said, we work on election integrity just about every session. Every session we go through, we hear testimony about how people cheated, how things went wrong, and we try to go back and fix those problems. And again, we heard testimony from Democratic and Republican elected officials, prosecutors, about the problems. And that's what this bill is based on. As far as these companies go, it's disappointing that these companies who are complaining about the law now, they pull this PR stunt. And let me be clear about this. Most of these companies have issued general statements about how important it is that people vote, that votes be counted. Of course, we agree with that. There's no question about that. Only one or two of these companies have specifically mentioned Senate Bill 7. And when they did, they couldn't tell us a specific thing in the bill they didn't like. They read some press release out of Washington that the bills were bad, and so they bowed the knee, and they, wanting to appear woke, I think that's the term, they had to come out and say, oh, we're against these bills. American Airlines, for example, has at least 10 lobbyists in Austin. You know how many of those lobbyists have called me, have come to see me about Senate Bill 7? 0. The president of American Airlines is all over the media now criticizing this bill. Still, no specific criticism. You know how many calls I've got from him, emails, communications? 0. It's disappointing. It's offensive what these companies are doing. And we've reminded them through the media because they didn't come testify. They didn't send written testimony. They don't participate in the process. We've reminded them that Texas is the 9th largest economy in the world. We used to say 10th, but now we're up to 9th. Y'all know this. We have a wonderful jobs-friendly environment. Employers want to come here. We're glad they do. And so we're going to listen to American Airlines. We're going to listen to all these companies. You know, anyone who comes to us, we're going to listen. We've heard from groups from the left to the right, business groups, interest groups, individuals. Anybody can come testify. Anybody can call us, write us. We listen to everyone. But at the end of the day, I've said this on Fox News, and I've said this on CNN, and also to a number of print reporters. At the end of the day, if these companies don't like the policies in Texas, I hear there's plenty of vacancies in California. So that's what's going on today in the Texas Senate. Election bills are moving through. We're working with our friends in the House to make sure that all the bases get covered in areas where we know people have been cheating. We're plugging those holes. This is about making the system better for everyone, Republican, Democrat. And we know on this call that when elections are fair, when the process works, elections are fair and the votes are counted, Republicans win. We have a conservative Republican state, and we're thankful for that. So I'd be happy to yield for questions or to yield to someone else, but that's what's going on in the Texas Senate. I'm so glad to be with you this morning.
Well, Senator, we are delighted to have you. That was excellent, very good information. How about if we could do this? If you could stay with us, we'd appreciate that. And then I'm going to just have Representative Click or Chairman Click give us a quick report if I can find her. I don't know. Can you unmute yourself, Stephanie? And because I'm not finding the phone number 620.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. And then from Stephanie, then we'll go on over to Representative Jatone. So Chairwoman Click, will you please go forward? And then we will have questions after that and have Karen take care of that part, please.
Yesterday, we had permitless carry on the floor in the House. It was a 7-hour fight, but we did pass the bill. We will have it on the calendar again for third reading today. The Public Health Committee passed out 6 pro-life bills last night, and we also passed House Bill 1399 that deals with the transgender issue. And unfortunately, that passed out along all of those passed out along party line vote, but we did get them passed. Next week, we will be working on budget, and that's usually a very, very long night with lots and lots of amendments. I know some other committees were meeting. I think elections met yesterday, but I am not certain what happened there, and I hope Representative Jatan can give us an update on that.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Chairwoman. Representative Jatan, I know you're around there somewhere. You can unmute and give us an update. There you are. I see you now.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so we did have our elections committee meeting last night. That went to about, I think it was about 11 o'clock when we finished, but that was primarily because we did some good stuff on the House floor yesterday. And so proud of what we accomplished there. And we'll get the permitless carry bill, I think, out of the House today and send it over to the Senate for them to get it through over there. We did hear a number of bills in the elections committee. We're going to continue to hear a number of bills that, as we continue to discuss, make sure that we're securing our elections and making sure it's consistent across the state so that we're able to make voting more predictable and easy for voters. And so I think we're doing a good job of getting those bills through the committee. We did have a formal meeting a few days ago to pass through some bills. And one of the big ones y'all were huge help on. And so again, thank y'all for all that you're doing to help us get these bills through the committee. And these should be bills that are have a broad consensus on, but because of how partisan this debate has become, we're struggling a bit. But these are passing along partisan lines, and they shouldn't be. One of the bill that you guys helped out with had to do with the Secretary of State being able to enforce the voter roll cleanup. And it seems like a no-brainer, but as we've discovered, the Secretary of State plays an advisory role, and they don't have the ability to come in and provide training, audit, or enforcement. And so, the bill that we passed through the committee would allow the Secretary of State to come in if an election administrator, tax assessor, county clerk was not updating their voter rolls. They'd be able to provide training first. And if the training wasn't sufficient, then they would be able to go in and audit and provide direct guidance on how to correct and update their voter rolls. And they could do that as many times as necessary before determining that there's actual intent to not update the voter rolls in that particular county. And then they would refer that to the Attorney General's office for to proceed with a felony. And it's amazing that with all those safeguards in place, there was still concern for the elections administrator, the clerk, or the tax assessor. I think that once we're able to prove that there's intent to ensure that the voter rolls are not accurate, there's good reason that there's accountability and consequences. And so we did manage to get that one through the committee. Paid ballot harvesting, DPS signature for mail-in ballots, which is really important one that I've talked quite a bit about, but making sure that when they're doing the ballot board or signature verification, that they're not only looking at the signature on the application, the mail-in ballot application and the ballot, but also the DPS signature, so that you have a third party another signature to verify that the person sitting in that ballot is who they say they are. And so we're making progress on all that. HB 6, I suspect will be heard on the floor soon, very soon. We'll have, I'm sure, a very lengthy debate on that, even though it's a pretty simple bill that everybody should be in agreement on. We'll have that debate. I think we'll get it passed and over to the Senate. Senate Bill 7, as Senator Hughes mentioned, has been referred to elections, and I have no doubt that Chairman Kane is going to get that in the committee heard soon and moving as well. And as the governor said, we will have election integrity bills on his desk. And I think that between SB 7, HB 6, and the numerous good election bills that are out there right now, we'll be able to push through some good stuff. And so continue to stay involved, engaged. Again, I appreciate everyone that's been able to come down to the committee hearings and provide testimony. It's helpful. The other side is fully engaged, and our voices need to be heard too. And so it's important that y'all are out there helping to show that there is support for this. And And so I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much. It's just so incredibly wonderful to have this kind of information shared with everyone. I do believe that we have a few minutes, Karen, that we could probably ask some questions, and then we would just go into our action items there. So Karen, why don't you go ahead, please?
All right, then I'm going to skip around. Touching on your last point, Representative Jeton, what will be the process of combining HB6 with SB7?
So they're actually not attached as companion bills. They're two separate bills. And so there's a chance that they'll pass both separately. And Senator Hughes may be able to better elaborate on this, but as far as I know and understand, they'll pass separately, and they both address several different things. So, but Senator Hughes may be able to better elaborate on that.
No, thank you, Representative. I believe that's exactly right. Representative Briscoe Kane chairs that committee and serves alongside Representative Jeton, and they've been fighting the fight. And so Representative Kane and his team, and Representative Schofield, Representative Jeton, and then folks over in the Senate, we've been working together even before the session. And so House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7 have some things in common, but many different items as well. And so they're all important. And so our goal was to have multiple vehicles. Ladies, I know you've been frustrated as we have when a good bill will go down on a technicality or it just doesn't make it through for some reason. So we have multiple vehicles so that if someone gets stalled, we can load up the important provisions onto another bill. So we want all these bills to make it through. So it's not at this point, this is tactical. It changes by the day. It depends on which bill gets through first, which one gets knocked out. Our goal is to see all these bills pass, and the good news is we still have plenty of time. It's still early enough in the session. We have time to get all this done.
Right.
Thank you. And the next question is has the investigation regarding voter fraud in Dallas County stalled, as has been heard, or is that going to continue? Is there anything that will be done to prosecute people in Dallas County?
So Brian Hughes here, and the House members may know more about this, but there are, I had a big debate with this lady on CNN and then with the Houston Chronicle about the number of open voting fraud cases in Texas. The AG's office tells us they have over 500 cases they are investigating right now. Some of those are in the courts and some are still being investigated. As y'all know, because of the COVID-19 limitations, it's been for over a year now, you can't really get to court. You can't really move cases through. So it's creating a backlog. But the latest numbers, when I was on CNN, I said it was over 400. Now it's over 500 cases of voter fraud still being investigated. Some of those are in the prosecution stage, and some are still being investigated. So there's a whole lot going on, and so the book has not been closed on any of those.
All right. Is it a misconception that mail-in voting means that the voter is not able to vote in the county during the entire length of that the polls are open and early voting, but only on election day?
I believe that's often the case. This has been a big discussion. The governor made a great point. After Senate Bill 7, House Bill 6, and these improvements come into play, Texas will still have more early voting opportunities than many of these blue states, these so-called progressive states. And yes, as you know, in Texas, you vote in person, and we have plenty of opportunities for voting in person. The exceptions are for those 65 or over, those disabled, or those who are going to be out during that voting period. And so, again, that's another area where these vote harvesters have been taking advantage of the voters and leaning on giving them bad information, lying to them, saying, here, you sign here, I'll fill out the rest of the information for you. So a lot of what's in Senate Bill 7, House Bill 6, and other provisions is to crack down on those folks who are taking advantage of voters, misleading them and intimidating them. So you're correct. There's plenty of time. There's ample time to vote in person in Texas for those who want to and who don't qualify for a mail ballot.
All right. Is there anything in the works to change or alter the machines that we are currently using, such as the ES&S machines?
So I can say this, and I'm talking too much, and I'm going to yield to Representative John, Chairman Click, but I'll say this. Yes, as you know, those Dominion machines, which were such havoc around the country, those were not allowed in Texas. We'd already rejected those. There were concerns about security. What we do have in Senate Bill 7 is the requirement that in Texas we move to a system where every vote, even those electronic votes, every vote has a paper backup. It's been frustrating for a long time. You cast your vote in an electronic system, but you don't know if it's been recorded properly. And when we need to do a recount, how do you do a recount with electronic voting? So under Senate Bill 7, also Senate Bill 1234, which we just passed, and other items, there'll be a requirement for an auditable paper trail. Now, that's not something you take home to show how you voted. Of course, we don't do that, but a paper record of your ballot recorded, kept there, so that if we need to do an audit, we can. We also have some important electronic audit requirements in that bill based on experience in Dallas County. We're also going to have a 24-hour live stream of central counting, so you can watch the votes being tabulated, also making sure the ballots are being guarded properly by law enforcement during the process.
All right, and that looks to be most of the questions combined.
Did JC or Stephanie, did you want to add to any of that? I think it was explained very well by the senator, so I just didn't know any additional information. Well, if not, go ahead. Sorry, Rep.
I can jump in. I think, yeah, Senator Hughes explained it very well. You know, there is a process that the state goes through, the Secretary of State's office goes through to verify those machines, to make sure that they are pretty tight before they make it to any county for use. But there are a number of bills, and, you know, I did pick up Senate Bill 598 from Senator Colcourse that deals with paper trails and paper backup, and, you know, and ensuring that is in every county. Because right now each county gets to determine which machine they use, and so there is inconsistency across the state when it comes to that. And we do want to make sure that we have the paper trail backup, that there is a way to audit and ensure that the results that come out of that is accurate. And when you have a fully electronic system, that there is opportunity for fraud and abuse, and so those paper ballot backups is an important key to this whole process.
That such good information, and what I think, again, as the governor had wrapped up his talk, and that's what we're here for. And as all of our representatives have mentioned, they need us, we need them, and they need us, and it's a team effort, and we want to be there to help you. So as soon as you know, if there's something out there that you need us to put a call to action out, there's a team of people out there waiting to hear, and we would love to be that person, one of the groups, to send all that information out and to help. So it is incredible. We want to thank all of you for your participation. Now, don't forget, we have our action items that we need to do. Let me back up for just one moment. Usually we have someone sharing a project they might be working on, but we decided to not do that this time because we knew we were going to have the time filled with all this great information. So that was deferred till next time. But your action items, first I want to say thank you for HB calling and communicating on HB 2546, as we already heard. Thank you for that. On Monday, April 20th, this Monday, the redistricting will have a hearing. Their committee will have a hearing on the House side. Please go to the TLO. You'll see that they have a section for the schedule. Like it's like in the middle, to the middle of the page, down the middle for redistricting. Click there, find out when they're going to have it and how you can do it. They are doing in person this time, but they are still allowing Zoom for testimony. I encourage you to at least listen in. You don't have to testify this time. Listen in to find out what's being said. But if you're comfortable and you are strong about your points, then go in and testify and give your points that you think are important. So I ask you to do that. Again, I'm going to remind you, May 1st is right around the corner, less than a month away. Are you backing up a candidate? Are you helping get people to early voting? Am I correct that early voting starts next week, which is the 20th? So we need to get our candidates out there. There's also, as Rhonda Lacey said earlier, there's CD6 that is going on up in the Tarrant County, Arlington, all of that area to fill that seat. So I ask you, get involved, not just here at the legislature, what's going on there, but also with our candidates of who's running for office. And so, and let's not forget, next week, our guest speaker is going to be Dr. Lloyd Potter. He is the Texas State demographer. Is that right? Did I say that right, Shirley? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you. This will be really interesting to understand this whole process of the redistricting. And so I ask you to join us next week. And again, if you have any action items that you want to share with us, anything you want to communicate, don't forget to go to texaselectionsreform@gmail.com. And if you want to watch any of the recordings from previous meetings or this one, you can go to TonyAnnDeShield.com under election reform, and you can see what's going on and read the minutes. Again, let me say thank you to our elected officials. You guys are awesome. We look forward to having you next week. Karen, thank you for reading the questions. You do an awesome job. And also I was told that she's no longer a young Republican, but she is still an active member. I told her she looks too young. She should still be a young Republican. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. We did it just a couple minutes past, but thank you for sticking in with us and being here. And let's go out and make a difference. God bless you all.